Hello everyone, welcome back if you've been here before. If you're new, my name is Nadia, and today I want to do one of my tutorial videos. This one is going to be about backstitch. I did originally have another cross stitch that I was going to use the backstitch video for, but I have just finished this little mouse here. And there's actually a lot more backstitch on this one to do. So it came in a kit. And it came with this piece of paper that I'm about to show you with just the backstitch on. This was quite helpful for me because this was a paper pattern originally. I highlighted all of the paper. So when you're working off of a paper pattern without Pattern Keeper or anything like that, it's very difficult sometimes to find where your backstitch is. This one was also a good idea to use because it had different colours of backstitch. If you can see on that piece of paper, the symbols are different, and that is obviously the colours. So we are going to work on the eyes first. Now this video was very, very long. I think it took me about an hour and a half altogether to do all the backstitch that I'm going to show you today, but I have cut it right down. It should be about 24 minutes long, this video now. And I'm just showing you with this first eye, the backstitch goes across two pieces of paper. So it's very, very important that you keep checking your paper pattern and make sure that you've got your backstitch in the right place. Because this was an eye, it was quite easy to find. Well, not quite easy to find, but it was quite easy to read. So I had to do the first half of the eye on one piece of paper. I try and hide the pattern as much as I can here as well, because this isn't mine. This kit was, I purchased this kit from Hobby Jobby, and it's a Luca S kit. The kit has come out beautiful, actually. I'm really happy with this mouse. But first of all, we're going to be using black. I believe this is black. That goes around the eyes. It'll be a little bit more difficult to see because it's black on black, but basically backstitch, the easiest way to think about backstitch is you're outlining pieces. So it's always important to do if the pattern calls for backstitch. However, you will see that I don't do all of the backstitch on this piece. I tend to only do backstitch on things that I feel like need it. Sometimes this is just a personal preference, but sometimes I feel like you don't need all of the backstitch that they call for some patterns. So I wanted to make this video fairly long so you could see different parts of the backstitch, if that makes sense, because I'm a visual learner myself, and I find it easier if I just watch people instead of them explaining it to me. I find things way more easier to pick up if I just watch. So what I'm doing at the minute, which is a bit difficult to see because it's black on black, but I'm only really going to about 2 stitches over each time, and I kind of go forward. So I'll go in front of where I want the thread to go, and then I'll go back on myself to make the line. I really hope that makes sense. So instead of coming up, say like if you're going from left to right, instead of coming up the first part and then going all the way to the right, I'll start from the right and come back to the left most of the time. I really hope that makes sense. It'll be a little bit easier to see when we move away from the eyes. They don't need much backstitch around the eyes, it's just kind of like a little outline. Now this pattern calls for whiskers and things in the scarf, which you'll see that I don't actually put in. I did start putting the whiskers in right at the end, but I didn't like it. The colour that called for the whiskers just didn't look right to me, so I'm actually going to frog it, because I think at the end you can see that I started doing it and then I just kind of stopped, so it does look a bit funny on the face at the end. But I have decided to frog all of the whiskers back out and not put them in properly. So as you can see with the backstitch, I'm not going very far across, and that's because this is an eye. I would recommend that you really follow your pattern, your paper pattern closely, and see how far along the line of backstitch goes. So typically I would not really go any further than 4 stitches at a time with one line, because you have to make sure that your backstitch is quite tight, because if it isn't, it will raise up and move against the cross stitch. So I always make sure that I try not to go any further along than 4 stitches. On this piece I actually do very short back stitches. Most of the time I'm only going over 2 stitches at a time. And the whiskers, I think that's the reason why I didn't like the whiskers. It called for having me to go over more than 4 stitches at once, and I don't like the way it sits on top of the finished stitches if you go too far. If you make like a long line with your back stitch, I'm not a fan of how that looks. But as we go along in this pattern, you'll see how good backstitch can be for certain things. So already I can see, just looking at this, because I'm re-watching the footage as I talk, doing the voiceover, I can already see how much this is outlining the eyes just by that little flick at the top. It makes it look so much better. Yeah, so you can see there, it made the eyes look so much better just by having that small little outline around them. So on this paper pattern you can see like there's whiskers all over the place. There's a bit for the hat that I'm supposed to be doing. There's pieces on the scarf that need to be doing, but I actually don't do any of that. I do the outline. So I think backstitch is important for an outline. So here I'm doing the arm. Excuse me. The arm and the outline of the actual mouse is the most important thing, because that makes them features pop. So I would recommend, if you're a new person to backstitch, do your outline first. So if you're doing a character, say like a mouse, don't worry about the arm straight away or the eyes. Go and do the outline around the body first. All of the backstitch on the outside of the piece, I would do that first. But I decided to start with the arm, and then I go to the outline. And you'll see, as we go along this arm, you'll really be able to see the difference. I did cut a lot of this out because it is a very long video, but you will see that I'm only really going about 2 stitches across at a time. And that's because we're kind of going in a curve as well. That's another reason why I don't go too far over with my stitches, but you are kind of going in a curve of the arm instead of just a straight line with the stitch. So it's easier for me to do about 2 stitches at once when there's some sort of curvature to the back stitch. Now this bit is, you could, I suppose if you wanted to, you could do like a long line across the base of the arm, but I decided not to, and I just continued doing about 2 stitches at a time. And then we've got a curve back up where the elbow is, not the elbow, sorry, the shoulder. We've got a curve back up, so it's given me a nice outline of the arm there. Then I'd start going over the other side of the arm to make it the outline there, and what that part does is make it stand out from the scarf and the tree, so it all doesn't look blended together, because the idea of backstitch is it makes the features pop on the pattern. So things like arms, things like faces, they're all really important to backstitch, but when it comes to the finer details, sometimes it's best just to leave them. And you'll see that I don't do the whiskers, and he actually looks perfectly fine. I decided, obviously, like I said, not to do the scarf features, because you can tell that this is a scarf. It doesn't need anything extra on it. And the way I backstitch is I do what I feel is best. And I would advise you guys to do the same. Don't always follow every single part of the pattern. If you don't like a part of the backstitch, don't do it. Don't worry about it. It's your individual piece. You know, you are the one that decides where the backstitch goes, and if there's a part that you do not like, then don't put it in. And I always do that. Now, as you can see, I've done that arm now and it looks a lot better than what it did without the backstitch, which is why I did that part. So now I'm doing the outline of the mouse, which I would suggest that you do something like this first. If you've never backstitched before, always go to the outline first. Really, I should have started with that first, but I wanted to continue. I think I just wanted to do the eyes first, and then I wanted to continue with this thread, because this thread is a different colour to what the eyes were. This is like a navy blue, which matches the jacket. Now, as this mouse isn't a straight line, I am just following the stitches. I don't always follow the pattern as well on the backstitch. If I feel like, sometimes you'll see backstitch goes across an empty space, so there'll be no cross stitch there and it's going in like a diagonal. A lot of the times I don't like that. I don't like where you can see just a line and no stitch underneath it, so sometimes I avoid things like that, but it's all about finding a way that works for you. Backstitch doesn't have to be, as I said, exactly like the pattern calls for. You can do it however you want, and you can add things as well. If there's a part where you feel like could stand out a bit more, then go ahead and put some backstitch there. And if you don't like it, you know, you can always take it out. It's not the end of the world. But the main thing to remember with backstitch is to not go too far along with a long line of thread, because it will raise up and it will move on your cross stitch if it's not pulled tight enough. So here I was going to carry on with the same colour, and it called for some like rippling effect in the trousers. So I was going to do that next, but I then decided to go and do the boots next, because I wanted to have an outline, or a guideline, sorry, of where these ripple effects were going to go in the trousers. Because once you've if you've only got one paper pattern like me and you haven't printed off a copy, which I do advise you to do, if you've got access to a printer and you're working on the paper pattern and you're highlighting, before you start your cross stitches and you start highlighting it, I would advise you to make a copy for the backstitch. Thankfully this pattern came with like that handy little thing where it shows me roughly where the stitches need to go, but I have had patterns where it's just the one pattern, just the one paper pattern, and no extra sheet like that. So it's very difficult sometimes to determine where these threads are going if it's not supposed to be an outline, because following the shape of an outline is easy, but when it comes to making things like the ripple effects in the trousers that you'll see in a little while, I just basically guessed where they were supposed to go. I could see on the pattern that they roughly went where I put them, but I don't think I got it 100% correct, and that's fine. That's okay. You know, you probably won't get it unless you can really determine the differences in the colours that are on the chart, like if they're two completely different colours next to each other. But because these are all blues and greys blended in together on the trousers, I just kind of guessed, because I couldn't tell what symbol was what on the cross stitch pattern compared to the actual chart. That made no sense. I couldn't tell from my stitches what colour was on the paper pattern. So what I did, before I went to do the ruffling on the trousers, I did the outline of the underneath of the jacket first, so that gave me a guideline above, and then I go down to the bottom and do the boots, so I know roughly where my ruffling in the trousers stitches needed to go. I really hope that makes sense, but it gave me like more of a better guideline because I was following my back stitch instead of the cross stitches on the chart. So when it came to doing the trouser design, I could see, okay, well, it needed to be this close to the other back stitch that I've already done, and I just kind of went from there. Excuse me. So I had to do a voiceover with this one because it's Christmas time and all the kids are at home. My son got a keyboard for Christmas, so it's been a bit noisy, but I went ahead and done the first boot. I cut all that out because, as I said, this video was like an hour and a half long, and I'm showing you now what I'm doing on the second boot. Now the boot actually called for me to do backstitch laces, and I decided not to do them. I didn't think it was necessary. If you look at the first boot, when my hand is out the way, you can tell that it's a boot. There doesn't need to be any laces there, and I felt like it was over the top because the laces that were charted on the kit went over the black backstitch as well, and to me it just didn't look right, so I decided, you know, I'm not going to put them in. I'm just going to do the main outline of the boots, and that was it. And as I said, doing the boots, even just taking the time, changing the colour, because the boot backstitch needed to be black. It needed to be 310. So instead of it being the blue that I was using for the trousers, I did have to change colour. But it was worth it to get my guideline. And then I go back and do the bottom outline of the mouse first. So he's got most of his outline is done now. So you can see there, just by outlining that little mouse, just that underneath part of the scarf, and doing his boots, it's really making him stand out a bit more, where before all of the stitches were kind of blurred into each other. I mean, the human eye will, you know, make sense of what that is anyway, but it just helps define your cross stitch a bit better. So now I'm going back and doing the random ruffling stitches in the trousers to make it look like a pair of trousers a bit more, give it a bit more of depth. And that's why I did the outline first. So I knew that there was a couple of two stitches there, well, two parts of backstitch, sorry, that needed to be on that further boot that's back, because he's kind of standing to the side. So these ones are smaller. So by doing the boot outline, it really helped me determine where to put the stitches. One of them lines is actually for his leg, so as you can see where the tip of the scarf is, that's supposed to be his leg line, which does really help as well determine the separation between the legs. And then I went on to do the trouser ruching. Is it called ruching or trouser lines? Just to give it an effect of a pair of big baggy trousers, I suppose. Now, as I said, these weren't 100% perfect compared to the chart. I just kind of freehanded it. I had the chart to the side of me, which I always recommend you doing, having the paper chart right next to you. And I just basically work by eye. I go with what I feel like is best. And I always encourage other people to do that. Please don't worry about getting your backstitch dead on with what's on the pattern. The only thing I recommend you taking the time to do is the outlining of things like mine. That helps determine the shape of the object, and then when it comes to individual random stitches like this, just do what you think is best by eye. I don't know if I said, I don't think I did, but this backstitch is just one strand. So the cross stitches on the kit are 2 strands full cross, and then the backstitch is just 1 thin strand. And then there was a little bit up here, which is why I put that top line in first, so I could determine how far down I wanted that line to go. And then I believe there's another one. Yeah, I think there is. So, I mean, you can just see, just by putting them small little lines in the trousers, I think on the pattern they were actually supposed to be a bit bigger than this, but I am really happy with that. I mean, you can tell just by looking at it, the separation of his 2 legs, you can see the effect in the trousers, you can see his outline, and I personally think it looks great. So now I actually forgot to record the first glove or mitten being backstitched. The one that's holding the tree in the forefront of the picture has already got backstitch on it because I forgot to press record. I had a little bit of a break and forgot to press record on that one, but this is being outlined with black. So I'm just doing his little hand that's further away, which is definitely important to do backstitching like this because it makes that part of it pop. So you can tell it kind of makes it stand out from the green of the tree. And then we move on to the mouth. Now this was probably one of the most important parts to do because a lot of this is obviously I'm doing it myself. There's no guideline other than this little bit here. So I followed the black to start with to make sure I had my guideline correct. And then I go up and do the nose part. So always try and find a main point, like a main starting point for your backstitch where you can use it as a guideline. So then I go from in the middle of a stitch up to make the smile. If I'd have started from here and gone down to the black, to the couple of black cross stitches, it'd have been more difficult. So I made sure I had a good starting point, if that makes sense, so I could go up and do this part because I didn't want it to be wonky. And then there's me just putting in his little nose, which was just 2 little lines. It was kept super simple. And there we go. And that's all you need. That really is all of you need. So now all I do here is do the outline of the scarf on this side. And I think that is it. That's all I do. So as I said, I do go on to do the whiskers, but I cut all that out because I've decided not to keep that in. I'm going to actually frog all of them out because I don't like it. And just by doing these I'd say I did about half of the backstitch that was required on this kit, and that's enough for me. I don't need any more than that. I didn't need the bits on the bobble hat. You can tell that it's a bobble hat. I didn't need to do it. And I decided not to put the whiskers in because you can tell this is a mouse. It doesn't need to be in there. He's got fluffy cheeks anyway from the stitches that I've put down. So I really, really hope that this video has been helpful. As I said, I'm a visual learner, so I hope someone's took some sort of help from this video. I'm not the best at explaining things. I don't always do backstitch because I usually do full coverage, but yeah, I really hope that you found this helpful, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much.